Today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips on curved piecing. I would like to thank Kim Jamison Hurst from Chatterbox Quilts and the Quilter's Way for the pattern for this block used in the video. I would also like to thank Stephen Bland from Bland Designs and the Idiot Quilter for his suggestions on how to square up the block. This is the block I'm going to be making, and it will measure 6.5 inches unfinished. This is the pattern I'm using. I've cut it from freezer paper. This piece has a convex curve. The inside black line represents your stitching line. The outside black line represents your cutting line. Same with this. This piece is the concave curve, and I'll be cutting that from my background fabric, which is white. I've pressed my freezer paper pattern onto my background fabric, and I've left excess fabric on all the straight sides. To cut out my pattern, I'm going to add extra to all the straight sides, and that will help me when squaring up the block when I have it stitched together. I'm going to be lining up the 1/4 inch line on my ruler to the edge of the pattern piece. You can see there I've cut away, leaving a 1/4 inch. I'm going to go ahead and do that on all the straight sides. After cutting out all my straight sides, I'm now going to cut my curve. I'm going to be using an OmniGrid rotary cutter, and it has the safety feature on it, so I can't cut myself. I'm going to line up my rotary cutter right along the edge of that black cutting line. This is what your piece should look like. From my print fabric, I've cut along the curved edge right along the cutting line, but I've left a 1/4 inch on all the straight edges. I can now remove my freezer paper from my fabric. I'm now going to fold my fabric in half and mark the center. I've placed my pieces on my wool cutting mat, and I'm going to place my print with the right side of the fabric up. I'm going to take my background fabric and line up with right sides together at the center point. I'm going to take my seam-aligned glue and just put a dot right at the center point. I'm now going to place a pin right at that center point, and I want to secure this bottom piece. So I'm going to take a pin. I want this piece to lay flat. This piece is now going to match up right here. Put a dot of seam-aligned glue right at that point. I'm going to take my tweezers and pull that edge so my cut edges line right along this line here. I'll move my pin right to the corner. I'm now going to line up the curved edges. With my seam-aligned glue, I'm going to put a few dots along that curved edge. I'm going to take my tweezers again and just simply pull to match my cut edges. The fabric will cup up, and you'll be able to line up those cut edges. You can see that it is now smooth. I'm going to remove this pin, and I'm going to repeat for the top section. Place my pin in. line up my side edges. I'm going to run a bead of glue just along that cut edge. Again, take my tweezers. Can now remove my pins. And there it's in place. At my edges, I'm going to place a pin. It's going to be facing in that way. I can now take this to the sewing machine and stitch 1/4 of an inch away from that curved edge. I'm now set up at the sewing machine, and I'm going to be stitching with 1/4 of an inch seam. I'm stitching with the background fabric on top. I'm going to just slide my pin back so it's not in the way. And I'm just going to start stitching. Putting my thumb here, and I'm just going to hold that in place and let the fabric come up beside my needle. I can now remove my pins. And you can see we don't have any puckers. And there it is. I'm now going to be pressing my block. You can press your seams whichever way you want. You can press them towards the print or towards the background fabric. You can also press them open. I'm going to take my water brush, and in here I have the Acorn Precision Piecing Easy Press Fabric Treatment. That was a mouthful. And I've just placed it into my water brush, and I'm going to run my water brush along that seam, and I'm going to press that seam towards my print fabric. Now I'm going to turn it over and press from the right side. making sure I don't have any little folds in my fabric. And now we're going to go on to the next step, which is squaring up our block. I'm now going to take 2 measurements. The measurements I'm going to need to make this a 6.5 inch block is measure from the seam line at this point on my pattern piece. I'm then going to measure out to the cut edge. So on my pattern piece, I'm going to measure from that seam line to the cut edge. Place my ruler on, and you see it comes out to 4 3/4 inches. And I'm just going to make a note of that on my pattern piece. The next measurement I'm going to need is to measure from the seam line to the cut edge of the pattern piece. I'll place that on, and it comes out to 1 3/4 inches. And I'll make a note of that on the pattern. Your 2 measurements should come up to the size you want your block to be. So 4 3/4 and 1 3/4 comes out to 6.5. On my 12.5 inch ruler, I have placed some glow line tape along the 6.5 inch mark. I've also placed glow line tape at the top edge of my ruler at the 4 3/4 inch mark. And that measurement I got from measuring from the stitching line to the outside edge. And I placed a piece of glow line tape here and here. Next, I took this measurement and measured down 1 3/4 inches and placed a piece of glow line tape along that 1 3/4 inch mark. I've also measured from this edge over and put a piece of glow line tape at the 1 3/4 inch mark. I have my oversized block, and as you can see, it's not exactly 7 inches, and it's 7 inches because I oversized it. So now I want to trim this to 6.5 inches. I'm going to place my block down on my cutting mat with this in the top right corner. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to place it on there and line up my 4 3/4 inch mark at the seam line of my curve, and I'm going to match up the 4 3/4 inch mark that I made here and line it up on the seam line. Those 2 markings are what need to line up. You'll move your ruler until you have them exactly lined up on the seam line. I'm now going to trim away that excess fabric. I'm now going to take my block and turn it this way. I'm now going to take my ruler and line up my 6.5 inch line along that cut edge. When I line that up on the cut edge, you will see that my 1 3/4 inch mark will line up exactly on that seam line. And it does on both sides. My 6.5 is lined up along the cut edge here, and I can now trim away those 2 little extra pieces. And you can see how wonky my block was. And now I'm just going to measure, lining up. And everything lines up to 6.5 inches. I now have a perfect 6.5 inch block that I can place into my quilt. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please leave a comment in the section below the video, and I'll see you in another video. Bye. Thanks for watching.